Welcome to the April BJCP Study webinar. I'm your host, Doug Piper, and I appreciate your allowing me to join you as we grow our beer skills together. We're about to go live now, and we're actually got a few things we're working on, but I just wanted to go ahead and kind of get things started and let you know that we've got several things going on here today. For those of you that were able to, we're going to do a commercial calibration with a Rodenbach run crew. So I hope everybody that can get a hold of one will have their chance to do it. And just wanted to kind of get some feedback from the audience right now. Can you see the video okay? How's it looking? Is it clear? Any pixelization? How's the audio? So can you give me a little feel for how we're doing there? And I'm going to actually look back here at another computer. Yeah, looks like we're getting everything. Okay, Catherine, thank you. Let's see. Tony, yes. I like my exercise equipment. I didn't know you could see it that well. The bike there is my favorite one. So anyway, looks like we've got good video, good audio, and Mirella will join us in just one moment. This is going to be a lot of fun, and I think what I'll do is just kind of keep going, and Mirella will join us in just a moment. But just to introduce myself, I'm Doug Piper. I'm a certified Cicerone. I'm also a certified beer judge, and I'm interested in growing my rank. And this all started from the lack of resources like Mirella that we're going to hear from today, and a lot of others were John Palmer, and I know none of us have those folks in our backyard, but I had even less. So it's been a lot of fun getting everybody together on these webinars so I can share my journey as I am learning. Mirella is going to today help us answer question S0 from the BJCP Written Exam, and this is on describe, compare, and contrast. And 50% of that score is describing the aroma, appearance, flavor, and mouthfeel according to the BJCP guidelines. So Mirella has a vast background in all of this, so it's going to be a lot of fun hearing her perspective. She's also BJCP National, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we introduce her. One thing I'll go through is also that this is not an official BJCP webinar. So please understand that everything that we say is our own opinions. It's also not an official Cicerone webinar. Again, all our own opinions. So we're just here to provide insights and perspectives as best we can. Just to also know, if the webinar is not playing correctly, please check and do a screen refresh. That's one of the best ways to get your computer going again. Log back in if you're having some issues. And note that periodically I am looking away from the screen because I've got several screens going here and I don't want to miss a thing. And this is a part of a series of webinars that I'm creating to help the BJCP study groups that I'm a part of. And if you're not yet a member of the BJCP study groups, I would encourage you. It's on Facebook. It's all free. And it is populated by some great folks like Mirella, actually. So one other thing I wanted to add is this is a viewer-supported system, and I wanted to mention that we've got several new Patreon supporters: Brent Dingus, Jerry Pringle, Gene Jockey, Clay Bunn, and Paul Clammer. Also had some one-time givers: Joe Darden, David Mason, Daniel Seka, Antone Com, John Lee, and Sean Kness. So we appreciate this. You guys are enabling this platform and the opportunity that we have to hear from Mirella. So also, when this is over, you will get an email with a link to the recordings, the slides, everything that we can provide you that we talked about here today. And I think you'll get a chance to get everything except Mirella's book. But Mirella's book is right there at the center of the screen. So if you're interested in that book, you can click on that and order it. So with that, I want to introduce Mirella Amato. And let's see if we can get you up.
Hello, everyone.
And I got you up full screen. There we go.
There we are.
All right. Well, welcome, Mirella, to the BJCP Study Group webinars. This is just a real privilege to have you here today. We appreciate it so much. Now, you're from Canada. Can you tell us a little bit about Canada and the beer scene and in Toronto specifically, right?
Yes, I am from Toronto, born and raised. I've been here for pretty much most of my life, with a few exceptions. Hi, Jason. This is fun. I like this. And the beer scene here is quite compelling. I would say when I started in beer in 2007, 2008, we were still behind. And when I say we, I'm talking about Ontario, which is the province that I live in. It would be the equivalent to a U.S. state. I think our West Coast was following the U.S. trends quite closely. And Ontario was a little behind, not so much because the brewers didn't want to brew amazing cutting edge beers, but because drinkers weren't quite ready. I remember in 2008, I was at the CBC, the Craft Brewers Conference in San Diego that year. I was there for the first Pink Boots meeting ever. Shout out to Pink Boots. And I met some Ontario brewers there. Of course, I'm in San Diego, so it's IPA Central, delicious beers. And I said to them, why aren't we bring these beers in Ontario? I want to taste this stuff all the time. And they said, we tried. No one wants to drink it. So it wasn't long. I would say 2009, 2010, I was doing a lot of public tastings then and got a lot of people creeping up to me after tastings and saying, what is this flavor in my mouth? And I would say, oh, that's American hops. Welcome. And there's going to be more coming. So at this stage, I would say we've pretty much caught up. We're, brewing hop-forward beers, the New England IPAs, the Brutes, the sours. A number of breweries have barrel aging programs, historical beers, use of local ingredients. So I would say pretty much all of the same trends. The only thing that really sets us apart, and if ever any of you are in Ontario, I don't know if any of you are from Ontario. If you are, please give us a shout out in the comments. But the one thing that is unique to Ontario and definitely worth seeking out is our cask conditioned ale. So that's something that is, I keep seeing that it's growing in the US. Doug, is it a thing yet?
Well, not really in my neighborhood, but if I go to Atlanta, there's a few places in Atlanta that have it, and I think there's one or two in Charlotte. And I don't know that it's growing. Sierra Nevada up in Asheville usually has it once a week on Friday, and they will have it. So I think it's a specialty item and maybe growing, but pretty limited, I think.
It's definitely, that's right. Woohoo casks. Yes, Jason. So the interesting thing here in Ontario is that one of our earliest breweries that opened in 1985, Wellington Brewery, decided to come out of the gate with only cask. And that's how they were going to set themselves apart. And when I started drinking craft beer, cask was everywhere. I remember going to a diner and they had a cask conditioned ale on tap. Needless to say, there were some issues with service because cask conditioned ale does require a lot of care and attention. But it did set the tone. We had a large number of breweries making cask from, really early on. Just to illustrate how much cask there was out there, I spent, I would say, 3 years of my life drinking only cask. So there was enough cask out there that I decided it was better. I preferred it. And that's all I drank for 3 years. And that was absolutely doable in Toronto, which I think would not have been doable anywhere in the US, or probably anywhere else except for England at that time. So, it's something that we've always cultivated. I am part of a cask conditioning ale advocacy group called Cask with an exclamation mark. And we also have a huge beer festival called Volo Cask Days. If anyone's looking for, what is the right time to come to Toronto for beer, Volo Cask Days is a huge cask beer festival with hundreds of casks. And they range from, really traditional casks to, what cask has sort of become now, which is, let's see what we can throw in and how it will taste. So really a crazy array of beers.
Wow. Well, my only cask conditioned ales pretty much are in the UK, and I traveled there a good bit over the years and got to enjoy them there. But very, very few here in the USA. But everybody keeps telling me to run up to Sierra Nevadas on Fridays, and I can get it. So
there's nothing like cask. It's so
you don't think? Oh well. Speaking of good beer, now you chose a nice commercial calibration, right?
I did.
Tell us a little bit about the road. Yeah.
What's your packaging looking like?
Oh, I think they're identical.
Okay. This was a bit of a challenge for me. Being in Canada, I was trying to pick a beer that hopefully a fairly large number of people in the US would be able to find and also available here and would not be horribly oxidized. So Rodenbach tends to last fairly well. And so this is, I'm sure everyone is aware, a Flanders Red Ale. We're all BJCP judges in here. And it is the benchmark for the style. It's a classic. It's brewed in Belgium. And according to the label, it has won many awards.
Look at that.
World Beer Awards. So this is the Grand Cru. Rodenbach does make a series of other beers. They do vintage releases that are just, sorry, I'm just warming it up because I just got home and pulled it out of the fridge.
I'm going to put mine in the wrong glass.
Oh, what glass are you using?
This is just nice for webinars.
That's fine.
Yeah,
That's
so
fine.
I don't know. Pat Fahey's supposed to be watching, so we might get a ding from Pat.
What would you say is the proper glass for the Grand Cru?
Well,
or of a wine glass?
Well, I don't know. You're the master cicerone. I'm the certified. I'll let you answer that question.
Well, my opinion is that your glass. Show it to me again. It seems like a stemless wine glass. That is perfect.
Stemless wine glass. Is that good? Okay. Well, good. Well, I won't be in trouble.
I am using this glass, so we'll see what Pat says about that.
Okay.
This is, of course, the Teku glass, which is designed for tasting, and was co-created by my mentor, who I love dearly.
Really? I don't want to get off on a tangent, but you'll have to tell me more. I never knew that. Who was it?
My glass seems to be dirty. Whose glass seems to be dirty? Dominique. Very okay. I know this person. It is not dirty. It is clean. It is reflecting the screen. Unless he's talking about your glass.
He might have been talking about mine.
All right.
Let's see.
Look at that lacing. It is very clear. Oh, Doug's glass. Merci.
Doug's glass. Okay. Well, Doug grabbed his in a hurry. But speaking of Pat, and I think you know Pat, and I know Pat, he's actually going to do a webinar May 22nd on American styles.
Oh, fun.
So that will be.
The Cicerone program just released their American styles program, didn't they?
Exactly. And he's going to be covering that book, which is a superb book. I've gone through it and thoroughly enjoyed it. We're also going to have another webinar with Eric Fowler of White Labs on May 30th. So this is new news to our audience. They're not aware. These are brand new webinars, and we wanted to announce them with your webinar. But if your beer has warmed up, do you want to go through it, Mirella?
It's not quite, but I'll give it. I'll keep warming it as we go, and I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm not overly concerned.
Do you want me to introduce you and give it just a minute more?
Well, let's dive in.
Okay, let's go.
Part of beer judging is adapting to less than ideal circumstances.
Yes.
I'm also seeing that the camera isn't quite capturing the gorgeous color of this beer. So those of you who have one in hand will see that it has this wonderful mahogany red reflection, literally like a garnet stone. I don't know if you ever looked through a garnet stone. It's crystal clear. The head is small, but it's tan in color. And the bubbles are fairly consistent on there. It's an interesting trait of this beer. It tends not to have too much foam, but it always laces, so you know it's good. So you just want to talk me through me? You would just like me to talk to a tasting? Is that what's happening?
They don't want to hear from a certified cicerone, a mere certified cicerone. They want to hear from the master.
All right, so the first thing that leaps out at me is a fruit note. And it's a fruit note combined with a sour note, definitely not leaning towards a balsamic vinegar. To me, it's coming across more like sour plums. I'm also getting a little bit of orange, the pulp of the orange, not the zest. And a really interesting toasted note, not like toasted malt, but more like oak, like literally a wood. Mm-hmm. Note, that's all that's coming out at the current temperature. Maybe more will come out as it warms, but I'm not going to wait. Let's have a sip. Ooh. I enjoy these beers that are a little bit off the beaten path, where the first thing you notice is not the hops or the malt, and it sort of throws you this curveball. When I'm judging, I also very much enjoy judging the experimental style, where you don't quite know what's in there. It really keeps you on your toes in terms of your vocabulary. Mm-hmm. But the first thing I notice here is the balance between the sour note and the sweetness. And they're really pretty much even, I would say. This is not a super sour beer. Some Flanders Red, some from Belgium are sweeter than this, like the Duchesse de Bourgogne, for example. A lot of American styles tend to be a little bit less sweet, but this has a really nice balance. And the flavor I'm getting, there's sour cherry, there's a hint of roast, which I believe the BJCP describes as chocolate. But there's definitely some roast there and a really nice tannic finish. Mm-hmm. So the beer, although it is sweet and round in the mouth, just kind of dries right out in the finish there, and you can catch those tannins. I've become quite obsessed with mouthfeel of late. I think, when we talk about beer, we talk a lot about the aroma and the flavor and the ingredients, and not so much about mouthfeel. And it's something we sort of hint to, this is the body, this is the carbonation, and then we move on. But a good mouthfeel can really make a beer. And I think with the increase in barrel-aged beers, I've also become super aware of mouthfeel, because the barrel, as it does here, gives that really nice tannic dry finish. So speaking of mouthfeel, this beer has a very round mouthfeel. I would say it's medium in weight, but the carbonation is so low, but still present enough that it creates a fullness, but not so much that you're getting any kind of prickle there. There's just a little bit of carbonation in the finish. And as it lingers there, I'm getting a little bit of pie crust, which is quite lovely. And brown sugar. This is a fascinating beer, because as it warms up, I'm sure more and more flavors will come through. Maybe I'll leave it here and we can come back to it later. How's that, Doug?
That would be fantastic, because as it warms up, we'll get some nice things. Well, fantastic. And I know your time is actually kind of short, Mirella, so why don't we go ahead? I would like to introduce you, but I will add one thing. Since Mirella chose the Rodenbach, I've been in contact with the Rodenbach Brewery, and their brewer, Rudy, is going to do a webinar for us in the fall.
Oh, nice. Rudy's great.
Oh, you know Rudy?
Yeah. Is he going to talk BJCP?
Well, we haven't figured that out yet,
okay,
but I think maybe we have thanks to you, but when they heard about the webinar, and he said, come on, bring it on. So we're working towards a September date, so that'll be fun.
Oh, fantastic. Here's another little fun tidbit. Can I put a link in the notes?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Just type it in the chat.
I also created a cocktail based on the Rodenbach, which I'm quite proud of. So I thought I'd go ahead and share that while we're talking about fun things. It is, it really emphasizes all of the different notes in the Rodenbach in a delightful way. Again, let's not go on a tangent, but there's the link if anyone wants to check it out.
Well, in case no one had already guessed it, Mirella is one of the few master cicerones in the entire world. She's also a national level BJCP judge. She's got a great book called Beerology. She's also, I don't know where you get time to do all this, Mirella, but you also have a website, Beerology.ca. Mirella, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. So we'd love to hear basically, what made you select the Grand Cru? I mean, do you just like the complexity? Does that lead into a little bit on answering question SO?
Well, the Grand Cru, I essentially was just trying to figure out what is something that is widely available, that is also available in the US and also available in Canada and would not be super damaged or gross.
Okay.
I don't know. I know certainly in some areas, in some states in the US, there's rules against refrigeration in stores. And I know that our local distributor doesn't always like to keep things cold. So I just wanted something that would stand up to the elements and that we would all be tasting more or less the same thing. Add that link for brewing. David, I don't understand what you're asking.
It does not look like it. Well, I see one with YouTube. The YouTube link up there.
Yeah.
Is that the one you? Okay.
All right.
So David, just look
sure
above or clarify the question.
So yes, that being said, I did integrate it into my answer. Before we dive in, I just wanted to talk a little bit, since this is a BJCP study group, a little bit about my background with brewing and judging.
Please. Yes, please.
I'm
Go ahead.
just looking at what Doug mentioned. We're going to have to, David, we'll have to address this later, maybe in the Q&A, because I'm not quite sure what you're asking, but we'll get to it. Don't panic. So yes, as many of you are aware, I am a Master Cicerone. I have my German's Beer Sommelier, also have advanced brewing certificates, both from Canada here and UC Davis. And the Canadian one was focused on off flavors and critical control points in brewing. That's actually where I met Dominique, who was commenting on your glass earlier, Doug. And the other one at UC Davis was really about the science behind beer and brewing. And these two things really, I think, capture what fascinates me about brewing and sort of where I'm leaning towards with my work and with my studies, which is really the sensory aspect and the science background that creates those, how are those flavors created? How do they come about? And how can we manipulate them through the brewing process? So if I look at that aspect, which is my passion, I can trace that all the way back to my first days in beer. And what I did in my first days in beer was my BJCP exam. So I took the exam in 2008. So that's the time when it was still all a written exam for everyone. There wasn't the two stages. That being said, the questions were similar. They haven't changed much. And from there, I did a little bit of brewing. I don't brew a lot. I did some home brewing from all grain to start for about 3 years, and then I let that go. I have some buddies who brew from extract, and every once in a while I'll go over and we'll play with recipes and I'll give them some tips. But I would not say that I am a home brewer at this stage. I don't think it would be fair to say. I am, however, a very active judge. I started judging in 2007 before even getting my credentials. I was an apprentice judge. And in 2009, I was invited to judge at the GABF. And then 2010, I was invited to judge at the World Beer Cup. So I've been judging both in homebrew competitions and larger competitions for years. And I do it as much as possible. It really is a passion for me. So if anyone has any questions about the judging side, then do not hesitate.
It sounds like you're just not an active home brewer, because I know the questions that are in the Master Cicerone and the National, they require you to know brewing. So it sounds like you're just not active at the moment.
That's correct. I have
Yeah.
studied it at length, and that UC
Yeah.
Davis course was recent, and it's all about all of it's called Intensive Brewing Science for Practical Brewing. And I went in with all my questions. So certainly a passion for me understanding the process, but yet not an active home brewer by any stretch. No.
Well, let's jump into your presentation, because I think that's what everybody's anxious to hear in particular. So we're going to share a screen here, and hopefully I will do it successfully. That's always a precarious part of the webinar. So there we go.
Let's. Can we skip to the next slide?
We certainly can.
I think we can skip 2 slides.
All right. So you want to move beyond?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we wanted to get too in depth with the Grand Cru, but I can see that I'd like to get the presentation in with enough time for a few questions. So, just one back, please. Doug.
One back. Okay.
Yeah. So I was asked to speak to question S0, which is the style comparison question. And this question is an interesting one to talk about, because unlike some of the other topics, the brewing or the ingredient topics, where, I could have outlined all of the information required to understand and succeed in answering the question, with the styles, it would take years to go through every single style guideline. So that's not something that I'm able to do. So what I thought I would focus on is general writing tips for the exam, then zero in on that question and focus on some ways to best prepare and study to be able to successfully answer that question. So that's the plan for today. Next slide.
All right. Let's see. All right, it's not going to let me roll, so I got to click. That means I got to click in the right place. There we go.
There we go. So I did put up a poll. I don't know how many people answered it, but I did see some people have written the BJCP exam before. And the one biggest challenge with the BJCP exam is definitely time management.
Well, to answer that question, 3/4 of the folks have said no, that they have not taken the written exam before. And the other poll is their greatest challenge is memorizing all the details of all the styles. So those are the 2 heaviest weighted answers.
Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So that's perfect. The key, though, really is time management. When I wrote the exam, I literally had a clock on my desk and sort of allotted a certain number of time for each question and was very disciplined about that. And it really is important to do that. So in keeping with that, it's really important to strategize when you're answering each question. Take a look and see, what is it that is being asked, and make sure that you address every piece, every question, or every aspect of the question. So the key is make sure that you're hitting all of those points and showing depth of knowledge without getting carried away into, an exciting aspect of something and then not finding enough time to complete the question. So that is the balance right there. Doug, do you mind pulling up? I don't think I printed out this particular slide for myself.
Is this the beer style question?
No, the previous one.
Okay. So cooperate here. There we go. General writing tips?
Yes. So identify the key information required, prioritize the facts, and show depth of knowledge, but stay on topic. Really requires discipline. Beyond that, make sure your writing is legible. Think of the person on the other side who's going to be reading this, and show them some love. You want your grader to be in a good mood. Keep your language simple. This is not the time to throw in fancy words. And to experiment with words. Just be as simple and straightforward as you can, and be organized in how you answer the question. So strategy and planning are key here. Has anyone spoken about this before, Doug?
Well, they have, but they took a little different approach. It was mostly trying to get it done in 12 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I love the drift that you've got on it that show your grader some love. Mostly what we emphasize is making it readable. But what you're saying is, you don't want to frustrate them when they're trying to go through it and figure it out. I think that's great. That's new perspective. Thank you.
And this is a pet peeve, so I'm just going to go ahead and share it. Know how to spell palate. You're a beer judge? Know how to spell palate. I was going to put that up as a poll, but then I thought that's obnoxious. So, the number of people who misspell that word, it's fascinating. All right, let's keep going.
Okay.
All right, so here's the question itself. Describe, compare, and contrast these three styles, styles 1, 2, and 3. Your answer should address the following topics. So 25% is to compare and contrast the styles. 10% is to list a commercial example. 15% is parameters. And then 50% is to describe each of these styles. So this is an interesting question. Joe, are you guilty of misspelling palette?
Yeah, me
Love
me too.
it. Love it. So here's the interesting thing about this question is a huge chunk of it, 25% there, essentially, thanks, Jason. That is, I think that would actually make me laugh. That wouldn't make me cranky. You just spelt it Pilates. That's delightful. So a chunk of the question relies essentially on memorization. I mean, when it comes to commercial examples, of course, there are some you know off the top of your head, Flanders Red, Rodenbach, Sierra Pale Ale, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, Stout, Guinness. But beyond that, it does require some memorization, as does the style parameters, right? So that's a huge chunk. And then another chunk is all just knowing all of these styles, because you don't know which three they're going to ask for. So I'm going to take a little time to delve into how I prepared for those two aspects and share some tips, which I hope will be helpful to people who are preparing for the exam. But before I do, I just want to dive into the first part of the question, which is to compare and contrast the three styles based on ingredients, characteristics, or background information. And that is worth a hefty 25% there. So Doug, if you don't mind, on to the next slide. So this is a breakdown I came up with. So notice that this is the cool thing about the BJCP. In general, everything is spelled out for you. One of the things I love about the BJCP is how incredibly fair and level it is. And they always let you know what it is they are looking for. So compare and contrast the three styles based on ingredients, characteristics, background, history, fermentation, and serving method. So as you can imagine, if you just say a few things about ingredients, you might not fare that well. If you touch on ingredients, characteristics, and history, you'll do okay. And if you can find 1 point for each, then you're set. So here's a little checklist that I created that I thought might be helpful to people. This is sort of what I run down in my head quickly when I'm answering this part of the question. So as an example, right, so there's our Flanders Red. As an example, we'll use the Berliner Weiss, Flanders Red, and wit beer. So with water, we're in ingredients. With water, nothing really comes to mind for me off the top of my head. With grist, for sure, I would say that the Berliner Weiss and wit beer use wheat, and the Flanders Red, wheat and pale malts, and the Flanders Red usually uses like a Vienna or Munich malt, specialty malts, and can have some corn. I believe up to 20%, if I'm not mistaken. So that's easy. Boom. Hops, low in all three styles. That's good enough. I can continue with this aspect, but that's not going to get me where I need to go. See what I'm saying about being efficient and strategic? So then characteristics. The appearance, of course, the Flanders Red is dark, and the wit beer and Berliner Weiss are straw in color, so that's easy. We could talk about the aroma, the flavor, balance, mouthfeel. Find 1 or 2 things that you could definitely feel are contrasting, or 2 are the same and 1 is different. And then in the background or history, geographical origin. So you could go in a few different ways here. You could say they're all from Europe, or you could say the Flanders Red and wit beer are from Belgium and the Berliner Weiss is German, or you could get a little bit more specific about where they are if you want. You can consider the time period. So for example, if one of these was an American style, I might want to mention that it is more contemporary. Or if I was comparing three very old styles, something that could be mentioned. Mm-hmm. And then something to consider, are the styles related? So for example, if you had a pale ale and an IPA, you might want to mention a connection there, or an English and American IPA or something like that. Then background of fermentation, ale versus lager. Well, these are all ales, so that's an easy win there. And then other organisms is something to consider. So in this case, the Berliner Weiss uses lactobacillus. The Flanders Red is aged in the Föders, so it can have all kinds of sour notes, but most commonly a bit of an acetic note. And then the wit beer doesn't use any other organisms. But you could talk about the specific yeast and the characteristics that it brings if you wanted. Mm-hmm. And then barrel aging and so on, serving method and unique serving technique, which I guess with the Berliner Weiss is built in. So easy. But the key here is to really think through every aspect and find at least one or two things in each category and jot them down and be efficient. So let's have a look at the next slide. So I think I will not read through this entire thing, especially if everyone is going to get the slides at a later time. Also because I can't read the whole thing. Is the whole slide visible to the rest of you? I have my face in the way. No comment? Okay. So this is a really thorough answer. And
I think it's full screen.
Okay. And if this was the entire answer to the question, that would be fantastic. But we have to remember that this is 25% of the question, and there's another number of things to address. So a more realistic answer, if you'll skip to the next slide, please, Doug, would be something like this. So we have these styles are similar in that they are all ales and they originated in Europe. So now I've got my ingredients and my background. The Flanders Red and Berliner Weiss have a sour note, while the wit beer is only slightly tart. The wit beer and Berliner Weiss are both brewed with wheat and are straw-colored with a high carbonation, while Flanders Red is barley-based and reddish-brown with medium-low carbonation. And a unique trait of the Berliner Weiss is that it's traditionally often served with a shot of syrup. So by no means a perfect answer, but it hits on all the points. And if you're pressed for time, that might have to do, unless you're a super fast writer. So now let's move to the next slide, where I have provided a weak answer. And this is very real. This can absolutely happen. So here we go. Berliner Weiss is a German style. It is so unique that Napoleon's troops used to call it the champagne of the North. Flanders Red is also wine-like. Another interesting thing about Berliner Weiss is that it's sometimes served with a syrup, or as they say in Germany, mit Schuss. The two most common syrups are raspberry or sometimes Woodruff, called Waldmeister in German. Craft brewers in the US have started making all kinds of syrups for their Berliner Weiss. Some even add fruit directly to the beer, which is against the Reinheitsgebot purity law that was passed in Bavaria in 1516. There should be no fruit in a Berliner Weiss. What's the rest? I can't read it because my head's in the way.
Yeah, I can read it. The other two styles are served without syrup, but are both ales, like the Berliner Weiss.
Right. So this is very real. This is what happens when you encounter a style that you love and that you know tons about, and you don't plan, and you think, okay, here we go. I'm going to talk about these three styles. Let's start with the Berliner Weiss. Next thing you know, it's 3 minutes later. And yes, everything in this answer is 100% true and accurate, but it doesn't answer the question. And it's not until the end there where they say, oh, and P.S., they're all ales. This is a weak answer because it goes into so much trivia about one and it ignores the actual. That is correct. It is not answering the question. The question is, to compare and contrast based on characteristics, background information, history, fermentation, or serving methods. This is a love note to a Berliner Weiss, which is delightful. This person clearly knows a lot about beer, also knows German, great with dates, got the Reinheitsgebot, nailed that. But this will not get the points that you need. You need to make sure that you are answering the question.
A BJCP national that's teaching a class right now for those of us getting ready for the national exam, he kind of contrasted it. The better ones are written like an engineer wrote it, and the ones like these are written like a journalist would have written it, which I thought was a good description.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to summarize it. And so, what I would add there is just keep your eye on the ball. This is the question I need to answer. I will keep it concise. Worst case, do something like that strong answer that I provided. If you can add a little bit more, if you have time, go for it, flesh it out, but make sure that you're hitting all of the points. And that's even in the question itself. Your answer should address the following topics. So there we go. Let's move forward. Okay, so that there was 25% of the question. We're left with the other 75%. And so here's the thing. 25% of that is your commercial examples and your parameters. And it's very interesting because for a while there, the BJCP had removed I don't know if you noticed, the parameters were not on the exam, and now they've gone back to requesting the style parameters. And I had sort of an objective look at the situation, and here's what it is. There are two style comparison questions on the exam, as far as I can see. And T14, the recipe formulation question, also asks for the parameters of the beer that you are planning to brew. So in the style comparison question, as we're looking at here, it's 25% of the question, which is 5% of your final grade in the exam. Another 5% from the other style question. And then in the recipe formulation question, it's 10%, which is 3% of the final exam. So knowing your parameters and your style commercial examples is 13% of the exam.
Wow. That's the difference between passing and not passing.
Well, I would say it's a strategic decision. If you think you are super amazing at everything else, maybe skip it. But I would say this is an important piece, and your likelihood of success will be a lot stronger if you actually have learned these. Now, the interesting thing is the BJCP guideline, the old ones, the 2008 ones, did have a section with all of the OG, FG, ABV, IBU all listed at the end of the examples, but that's not there anymore. So you have to fish them out. I'm sure there are many, many tools online that you could use. But what I did, and for those of you who've seen my book, it's in the glossary, is I created visual charts for myself to help. I don't know if you can see.
Oh, that's very clear. I'll enlarge your screen. Hold it up again if you don't mind.
So this is how I did color. Is that upside down? It is upside down. So you can see which styles are straw, gold, amber, copper, moving into brown and black. And then here I've got the alcohol by volume of the different styles. Now, in my book, these don't correspond to the BJCP styles. I used a slightly different approach in my book because it's drinker focused, not brewer focused. But I did want to mention that as a tool, because for me, looking at a bunch of numbers is too much. And I found it really helpful to line everything up. I just used an Excel spreadsheet and to be able to see, okay, all these styles start at 5% ABV, and all these styles, end at 6.5. Well, this one's sticking out a little more, and it really helped to get a feel of roughly where they were. And what I found is in a pinch, when I was in the exam, if I couldn't remember the exact numbers, I was more or less able to ballpark it based on, where I remember things sitting. So that's what I did, and it worked for me. So I recommend trying that. And I am sure that I'm not the only one. If you go online, you might be able to find some of those diagrams already made. Just make sure that they're for the current style guidelines and not the previous ones.
Yeah, I was going to make one of those. We'll have to see if there isn't one maybe on the BJCP study group. Surely somebody in that group has already got that.
I can't be the only person who thought of this, but
Yeah.
I had a chart for every single set of parameters, and you saw the color one. I actually color coded, and it very much helped. So just think about how it is that you learn things and try to lay things out accordingly. All right, I think we're almost done. What's the next slide?
All right, study tips.
All right, style descriptions. So the other piece of this is, as was outlined in your poll, memorizing all the style descriptions. And I do not advise doing that. It is way too much information. And the key is to not only memorize them, but to understand them. And to understand them, you really need to taste them. So the way I approached things in 2007, when I decided I was going to take the BJCP exam, is that I printed out all of the style guidelines. Smartphones didn't exist back then. I had them all printed out, and I still have on my phone the list of, there are 3, I think, BJCP styles that I haven't tried yet. And I had a list, and every time I went to the store, I tried to find something that I had not, a style that I hadn't tasted before. And every time I traveled, I would go to the store and look for a style that was, particular to the area, or that I might be able to find there that I couldn't find at home. And I would taste them while reading the guidelines and try to make that connection, because it's one thing to read the words. It's another thing to understand how those descriptors feel on your palate and what they taste like. And through that experience, you can really start to internalize, again, get an idea. Okay, I know this is a light-bodied beer. I know this is a medium-bodied beer. I know what color this is because I've had it many times. And it becomes a little bit less about memorization and a little bit more about building a database in your head. And I think that's one of the reasons why there is a judging component before getting to the written exam, to really encourage people to taste a range of different beers and to internalize those styles. So from there, what I started doing is tasting beers and taking notes and then comparing them to the BJCP. And by the time I wrote my exam, I was super familiar with most styles and was able to really describe them from, again, an experience perspective rather than a memorization perspective, which I think is just too much to handle. So if you wouldn't mind going back to that slide, Doug, I had a few specific tips I wanted to share.
Is this on the study tips?
The next one.
Okay. So we're going backwards or forward?
No, forwards. It's note backwards. There it is.
Okay.
So to know your styles, the first thing is you need to taste. Taste as much as possible and be methodical. So that's what I just talked about. I mean, now you can just get the style guidelines on your phone. You're trying a new style, read the guidelines as you're tasting it and see if you can make some connections there. See, how close the guidelines are to the example that you're actually tasting. And the other piece is taste authentically. And I didn't know which catchword to use, but what I mean there is, if you have the choice between a Märzen brewed locally or a Märzen brewed in the US, try Germany, try the German example. Or, if you're off in England, it's very tempting to check out all of the latest amazing craft brews out there. But you're in the UK, find a traditional porter to taste, find a cask conditioned ale to enjoy. That was on the BJCP, but so you know what I'm saying? Be strategic about what you are tasting. The other piece, of course, is judging. And so the first thing I said there is humbly. And judging, as I outlined earlier, is one of my absolute favorite things to do. And I much prefer to judge with people who know more than me than I enjoy being the person at the table.
How often
with
does
most
that happen?
experience. I seek out those opportunities. So I try to, for example, judge German beers in Germany with German brewers, or, sit down with Rudy and talk about Flanders Ale. I'm very curious to see what he's going to talk about when he comes in. I think the cool thing about beer is that, we learn so much, and everyone who's into beer is passionate about it. And it's very easy to fall into that trap of just wanting to share the passion and to just start talking about everything that you know. But sitting back and listening is really a great way to learn. The other thing I said, judging daringly, and this goes back to the tasting authentically, but if you're judging in a competition, judge the light lagers. Get in there and judge a style that you don't enjoy, because guess what? You need to know all the styles. And again, it's super easy to just stick to what you know and what you love. I always challenge myself. Last year, I remember I applied for pumpkin beers. It is not a style that I've ever understood or been, super keen on. And I thought, you know what? I need to get out there and see what all of the different permutations of pumpkin beer are, and, make a decision there. But at least understand the styles and the nuances of it, and be able to, in an educated fashion, talk about what should or should not be in this style. And the cool thing about the BJCP guidelines is they're pretty dead on, When there's something that's clashing in a beer, you go back to the guidelines. It's like, oh, that's because it's not supposed to be there. Wonderful. And then the last piece, of course, brewing. Go old school. Do it. Find some classic recipes and try to brew those instead of always brewing something new and different. Yeah, that's an interesting point, David. Pumpkin ales were certainly, and alternate fermentables were very big in North America at a time, for sure. I don't think they tasted quite like the ones that we have today, although I'm sure a number of them were spiced. The other thing I wanted to mention is, it's interesting, this is new again in the new guidelines, style comparison section in the BJCP guidelines, where they'll compare to similar styles, so that's worth reading. And, I did want to leave a few minutes for questions, so I'll just say this last thing because it's very important. And this is about my book, and an aspect of my book that not a lot of people know about, but is particularly critical for BJCP, prospective BJCP judges. And that is the examples that I've listed under each style. So those style examples took me as long to compile as it took me to write the rest of the book. And the reason being, this was a North American release. A lot of people see that I'm from Canada. They think, oh, it's a book about Canadian beer. It is not. It was, I knew when I wrote it that it was going to be released across Canada and the US. And it was very important for me that no matter where the reader was, they would have access to what the BJCP would term a commercial example, what I would term an authentic example of the style. So I spent hours and hours and hours digging. So Doug, if you want to pull out that slide again, just can you maximize it?
I certainly can.
Yeah. So you'll see the commercial examples from the BJCP there for Doppelbock are mostly German. There's a Great Lakes one. I don't know what the availability of that one is, the New Glarus. If you look at my list, it has a number of examples that are not in the BJCP, but might be available in other areas. Certainly for Canadians who can't find a lot of the BJCP styles, or people in some areas of the US where there's less distribution. I really did my best there. And the way I chose these styles is they were repeated gold medal winners in major competitions in their style. So they're really considered to be authentic for the style. And it just was really important to me that when I'm talking about styles, that the reader be able to taste that style and really understand what it's like. So I wanted to mention that for those of you who don't have commercial examples available in your area, or there's gaping holes for certain styles, that's, what that section of my book was about. And literally, I spent as much time putting together those lists as the rest of the book.
And there's a tendency for us to think that these examples are somehow handed down from God. And I was actually talking to some BJCP leadership, and they said, they're just the best examples. There's so much other variability. Don't seek those out as if they're the standard. So yeah, that's great to have that, Mirella.
Don't seek them out as if they're the standard, but those ones are ones that have been tested and true, right? And the question always arises, I'll just use Märzen as an example. For many years, I tasted Märzen brewed locally. I didn't know if it was authentic or not. I had no clue, right? So until I went to Germany and I tasted them there, and it gave me a good idea. But the style examples listed in the BJCP weren't available here. So yes, I hope that'll be useful to some people. And I think that's the end of my presentation. Just the one last slide is just emphasizing again, before each answer, think about what you want to say, think about your key points, and lay it out in a very organized fashion. Answer the compare and contrast, answer the style parameters, and lay it all out so that the grader can say, oh, this is this part of the answer, this is this part of the answer, this is this part of the answer. 25%, 50%, 10%. Check and done.
So Mirella, you've been so kind with your time, and I know you have a hard stop in like a minute and a half. Do you want to try?
Let's try.
You want to try?
Have questions? Yes.
Yes. Looks like you've got 3 there. Mm-hmm. And we won't have a lot of them, time for a lot, so maybe you can vote up your questions. So the first one is from Joe, and it says, do you think it is okay in the compare and contrast section to deconstruct the flavor profile and isolate 1 or 2 elements in a similar fashion that you might when it comes to pairing with food? How would you approach this method if you said yes?
So if I understood correctly, the question was, would an accurate answer be, getting into some of the nuances of the style? And I would say that's fine as long as it's a portion of the answer, because remember, the compare and contrast is asking for ingredients, it's asking for history, it's asking for all these different aspects. And again, the more you delve into one area, the more you risk running out of time to be able to cover the other ones. Also, food pairing is not part of that question. So I wouldn't even go there for that particular question. That would be a solid tangent.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. We're going to kind of rush through these. So the next one is from Omer.
Hi, Omer.
In the compare and contrast section, what do graders look for? In other parts, the answer is quite straightforward and touch every aspect that you comment on in a score sheet: malt, hops, fermentation, etc. Same with the parameters and a commercial example. So is there a list of things to specifically compare and contrast?
Yeah, so again, Omar, that list is there. It says based on ingredients, characteristics, history, fermentation, and serving methods. So I would focus on those things and be very systematic. If you missed, I'm guessing maybe you missed the earlier part of the presentation. In an earlier slide, if you want to go back and look at it, I outlined in each one of them questions you can ask. And my goal, my suggestion for you would be try to find one answer from each column. That would be my suggestion. One more question. Let's do it.
Okay. One more question. All right. So question is, how do you meet the independent thought requirement in answering the compare and contrast question?
That's an interesting question. I think that comes down to what I was saying earlier, which is make sure that you have tasted and experienced the styles. I have not graded the written part of the BJCP exam, but I have graded other exams, many other exams. And I can tell the difference between someone who has just read a book and is spitting it out and someone who has actually experienced it. So that can be either tasting or through home brewing. But I wouldn't worry too much about that aspect of the question. If you have the experience, the way that your answer comes out will speak to your independent thought. So I wouldn't spend too much time stressing it. That's like an added layer that I would focus on hitting the key points, being succinct, not going on a tangent, and stick to your time. It's you guys are in for a treat. It's a doozy of an exam. Sorry, I just saw a question here. Have you done any BJCP score sheets for the different beers you listed, like Gordon Strong did on the different types in the 2015 guidelines? I did a bunch of score sheets, but they were all for the 2008 guidelines. I have not done score sheets in a long time, so I'm afraid I don't have those available. Sorry.
Hey, that sounds like a good BJCP 201 group project. So maybe we can do that.
For
Mirella,
sure.
you have been so generous with your time. It's 2 minutes after I know what you promised, or I promised you. So again, let me just thank you for your generous time. You will share the slides, and we can send that to everyone that registered. Is that okay?
Sure, yeah, if you like, yeah.
Okay, great. And with that, just a reminder, these are self-supported webinars. So if you can find yourself a chance to donate, pop the donate button. And also know the webinar is fully recorded. It'll be sent along with everybody that has registered. And one last thing, Mirella, you may have a closing comment, and you may want to share how people can get in contact with you.
Oh, sure. Well, I'm widely available. I'm at Beerology everywhere. So Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, everywhere at Beerology. It's easy to remember.
Well, fantastic.
Good luck, everyone. Good luck.
Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye.